Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our fourth episode of the Great Futures Forge. I'm your primary host, Ameer Washington. We're joined by someone here I'll introduce to you later. She's rather important to me in this organization, but we're happy to have a very special guest here. For those watching, please subscribe, hit the like button because it helps us with the algorithm to get more views. And maybe one day a little bit of cash for the Boys and Girls Club to support our young people. And I want to introduce this year's 2024 Youth of the Year.
Hi everyone, my name is Precious Akila. I am the president of our teen center here at Boys and Girls Club, and like Mr. Washington said, I am our current Youth of the Year. And we have the pleasure and privilege and honor of being joined by our state AG,
Matt Platkin. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. It's the second day that he's invaded our space.
In the last week.
In the last week. It's the day we wanted you here. But we had some fun last week. But we're going to start with our fun piece, which is typically what we do at the end. But AG's got a tight schedule. You know, he's a pretty important person around here in New Jersey. And so I'm going to turn it over to Precious because she's more fun than I am sometimes.
Most of the time. Okay, so my first question is, I'm a bit of a foodie myself. I just finished eating an amazing burger. Top tier. Wendy's.
I love Wendy's. More of a McDonald's person.
Really?
Yeah, sorry. But I do love Wendy's.
Okay. So with that, I'll ask, what's your favorite fast food?
Favorite fast food? Probably McDonald's.
What from McDonald's specifically?
Big Mac.
Big Mac?
Yeah.
It's classic.
Okay. What do you think about the E. coli case? Have you heard of it?
Now you're trying to scare me.
I'm so serious.
There's one restaurant that I won't name that I stood away from for a little while because of the E. coli, but we're good now. We're good now. So not McDonald's.
Okay, what's your favorite movie?
Dark Knight.
Oh, Dark Knight. Okay.
I love Batman, and I don't know. There's something about like the way that movie's shot and him taking on, doing everything he needs to take on the corruption fights in Gotham that I really love.
So that's Batman over Superman for you?
Yeah, big time.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I like that Batman doesn't have superpowers. He's just hard and
I like superpowers. I want superpowers.
Yeah. So my 6-year-old's big into superheroes now, so I'm relearning them all through his eyes. And now Star Wars, which is not my thing, but superheroes, definitely Batman.
Yeah.
Going off of superheroes, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, I'd love to fly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to sit in traffic.
That's better than me. Apple or Android?
Ooh, we sued Apple,
Oh.
so I got it. Although we've also sued the companies that use Android. So I use an iPhone. So yeah,
okay.
Seems like a conflict of interest there.
Yeah, because Apple, that's our friend.
That's our friend.
Yeah.
But he's got one in his pocket, so he didn't really.
Well, we're trying to make it cost less. So, so everybody wants that.
Okay, that's good.
The economy is suffering.
Pepsi or Coca-Cola? This is also conflict of interest because Coca-Cola helps us.
They were just here for our holiday party. Thank you, Coke.
So I don't drink much soda, to
good.
be honest with you. But if I had to, I would say Coke.
So funny enough,
I believe in answering the questions.
That's
so.
perfect. Because funny enough, I grew up as a Pepsi guy.
Huh.
I now enjoy Coke, and they actually have a Coke Oreo infused
so
drink. So, if for those of you back there, so we have some people behind the cameras.
Coke Oreo?
Yeah,
Oreo
I promise you,
Coca-Cola.
it literally tastes like Oreos. Like we had a podcast with Coca-Cola at their studio in American Dream.
Huh.
I'll take this one.
Yeah.
Favorite music genre, band, or artist?
Springsteen.
If you could meet one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Springsteen.
Great.
And Barack Obama.
And Barack Obama. You never met Springsteen?
I've never met
From
Springsteen.
Jersey.
I know. Trust me. I've tried.
You gotta figure
One day
out,
we'll get there.
gotta figure that out. If you weren't a lawyer or a public servant, what would you be doing to earn a living?
I can't say shortstop for the Yankees or point guard for the Knicks.
You could say it.
It's not going to be real.
Probably not.
I would be doing that even if I was a lawyer. If I wasn't, I'd probably be a writer.
What would you write?
I wanted to be a journalist for a while. I like people's stories, and I think that's ultimately why I went to law school.
So this isn't on the page, but you brought it up. So if you had to give journalism a rating right now, both news media on television in general, where would you score between 1 and 10?
Look, not great, but I don't think it's all their fault. I think, this way social media has evolved has changed the landscape for media, and the pressure for them to make money in new ways. It's been hard for them to adapt. But there's no question the real losers are the public.
Yeah.
Us not getting information, Precious, your generation, the lack of access to information that's credible, it's reliable, that's balanced. People now, take the last election, more than half of the country said that they got their news exclusively from social media.
Right, yeah.
Not some of it, exclusively. Which means they're getting a filtered view of what's happening in the world based on algorithms that none of us have visibility into.
Absolutely.
So I have, it's unfortunate. I mean, just in New Jersey, the Star Ledger just announced they're no longer delivering print papers. They're shutting down their editorial page. They're laying off a lot of people off. That's the state newspaper.
Yeah.
And so what happens when that? People are less informed. Corruption can occur. Government doesn't serve the people that we're supposed to the same way. So all of that, I think, is related to a decline in the media.
Yeah. I'm sorry to get too deep early on, but
No.
I think it's important. I think journalism, for us,
We jump from Oreo
Cokes
Cokes
to journalism.
to decline in news media.
You are Precious. You're being very modest today, and I like it. I like this you with the suit on, being cool, because usually you're in here with your sweatpants and everything.
Let me break the fourth wall.
Yeah, but no, I think that's important, right? Because I grew up with the newspaper in hand and all that, and news used to be very boring. Now it's almost like entertainment. So, some more before we get into some more of the deep stuff is New Jersey is
the best state in the country.
Being an attorney general is
a privilege and the best job I'll ever have.
Your wife is
way better than me.
I was gonna say, don't get in trouble.
Oh, I know. I didn't get this far not knowing how to that. I met her on the first time I was 23. First time I was ever engaged in politics in a real way, and we've been together ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
way better than me.
My wife would say
Nowhere near good enough for her. No, I'm kidding.
We'll cut that out.
She would. I hope she would say I'm a good dad.
That's awesome. So my kids are
crazy, but the best part of my day.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. 6 and 1. So the 1-year-old, she's my 6-year-old. I love him, but now he runs the show.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've got a 3 and a 2-year-old. Sometimes it's painful. I was up at 1:30 on Sunday night because my 3-year-old wouldn't go to sleep. So
yeah.
I had a very hard day on Monday for a holiday party. And the last question for fun, but it's kind of an interesting question because we talked a little bit about a conversation you had with a friend back during the Denver Broncos loss to the Seahawks. But your closest friend would describe you and say that Matt Platkin is
hopefully somebody who's always there for me. I've got my best friends have been friends of mine for decades now, so we're a very tight group.
That's great. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Precious. I know you wanted to dig in and really find out about this guy because he's got this whole entourage back here behind the
problem
camera.
for this is my friends would also probably say I talk too much. So hopefully we get through as many of your questions, Precious, as we can.
Right. Okay, so most of us, at least people my age, don't know what an attorney general does all day. If there's like a big case in social media, we hear about something. So you've had some interesting things you worked on, a lot of organizations that you help. So what's your day-to-day life like? What do you do from the start of your morning to the end of your night?
So I'll let you in on something. When I was in 11th grade, I wouldn't have known what an attorney general is either. In fact, probably much later after that, I wouldn't have known what one was. My job fundamentally is to keep you safe. It's to keep the residents of this state safe. And that takes a lot of forms. It means safe from gun violence. And we've had record low, 2 years running, record low levels of gun violence in the state, including right here in this city, which it's still too much. Any one shooting is a tragedy, and that drives me. It's the issue that originally got me into public service. But we've seen the lowest number of shootings New Jersey's ever had for the last 2 years running, which is something I'm very proud of. So it's keeping safe from gun violence and other forms of crime, but it's also keeping you safe going about your life, like making sure you can go to school or come here or go to the grocery store or the movies and not feel safe because of not feel unsafe because of who you are. It's making sure, we talked a little bit about social media, that these big businesses aren't taking advantage of you and targeting you in ways that violates the law and puts you at risk. It's making sure, when you go to the store and buy something, that you're getting what you need, that they're not charging you more than they should, that they're not selling you something that's dangerous. It's making sure when you go outside, you breathe air that's safe for you to breathe, and you drink water that's safe for you to drink. And so we do all of those things. And so my day, the answer to that question is very simple. I don't have 2 days that look alike, because every day we're waking up and doing different things to keep our residents safe. Last week when we were here to announce the largest lawsuit ever filed against a gun manufacturer in this country by state attorneys general. Again, holding them accountable for causing really, really devastating harms in our communities and making money off it. The company's actually based in Austria, making money off violence in the United States. And so I wake up every day excited. Sometimes I'm a little tired too, because I know you feel the pain. A 1-year-old doesn't always operate on Attorney General schedule time, but 6-year-olds don't either, unfortunately. But I get to get up every day and do important work. And meeting with folks like you, when I see the younger generation thinking about doing what you're doing, it really motivates me, because that's what it's all about. I was your age when I first started advocating for gun violence prevention work, and it was because the assault weapons ban was ending federally, and I didn't think people in the United States needed the same weapons of war that my friends had in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I see you now doing this, and it reminds me what this is all about. And so no 2 days are alike, but that's what makes the job really fun.
But you grew up in New Jersey,
yeah,
and you went to school in California.
Yeah,
Stanford University. So you're probably a smart guy, maybe a little smarter than me. I stretch.
It was a lot easier to get in back then.
Really, I like that. There were some people here humble bragging earlier about their AP classes and the like, and I'm looking at them out of the corner of my eye. But it stays warm there pretty much most of the time. It's cold here. Was it because you were from New Jersey that you came back? Like, what drew you back to New Jersey to do this work? Like, you could have done advocacy for gun violence anywhere, right? In the country, California's great, people move there, but why back in New Jersey?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, why I went to Stanford was because of an Essex County guy who, Precious, you may never have heard of, Brevin Knight. But growing up, Brevin Knight was a superstar, and his brother Brandon, superstar basketball players from Essex County. Brevin went to Stanford and put Stanford on the map. So in the mid-90s, when you could only watch one NCAA tournament game at a time, I'm the youngest attorney general in the country, but this is probably a foreign concept. So like now you can watch every game on your phone. Right. I turn on the TV and Brevin Knight was leading Stanford in an upset over Tim Duncan. Do you know what Tim Duncan is?
She's a little too young for you. You can talk to
Tim
me
Duncan.
You can talk to me for this
greatest power forward of all time.
We're on the same page.
Brevin Knight ends his career, and so I say I'm going to go to Stanford. No idea where Stanford was. No idea how hard it was to get in. But that was sort of after that. I was like, all right. My parents would, if I was ever acting up, they just said,
hold on. Wait a second. You went to Stanford because Brevin Knight was
100%.
playing basketball. 100%. So it wasn't like I'm a smart guy. I'm doing great in school. I'm straight A student.
For years, I didn't fly that much. And I was always afraid of flying.
Yeah,
deathly afraid. And so my dad knew that, and he told me that Stanford was spelled with an M and that it was in Connecticut. So literally for years, it probably was still 4 or 5 years before I figured out that this school was in California, and I was going to have to get on a plane if I was going to go there. But yeah, it was Brevin Knight. So it was never really a question to me if I was coming. My whole family was here. My mom was born in Newark, actually, at Beth Israel. So
me too.
Yeah.
Oh, mom.
So my grandparents were in the Weequahic section, and my dad's side was from Clifton and Patterson, and so we. To me, it was never a question if I was coming back. And I grew up here. I was public school educated here. My parents met here. I'm raising my kids. My kids were born at the same hospital I was born at. So, it's...
I don't have that.
But I'm proud. I knew I wanted to get involved in public service. I knew I wanted to do work that was important. I didn't know the first thing about... I wasn't politically connected. I didn't come from a political family or anything like that. Right. But I knew I wanted to give back. And it didn't make sense to me to do that anywhere else than the place that had given me everything that I had. I had the best. I remember showing up at Stanford. I was public school educated, and I was sitting in a class with kids who went to all these fancy prep schools, and I got their writing assignment. I was like, this would have been a D at high school. Like, this this would have never passed muster. And so I had a great education here and got to go off to some of the best schools in the country, but I knew I was coming back.
That's awesome. Precious, you want this one?
Yeah.
This next question?
Okay.
Make it a good question, Precious.
I always ask good questions, Mr. Washington.
That's the right answer.
Thank you. So you were in private practice before, but now you are a public official. So my question is, I used to want to do law for a long time, and I had a conversation with Mr. Washington, and he told me that most lawyers don't even want to go to court, and I was like, yeah, never mind. So what's the difference? What's similar being in private practice and then being a public official?
So look, I went to law school because I wanted to help people, and for me, fundamentally what a lawyer can do is help translate a really complex and frankly scary process to a lot of people into things that they understand and help advocate for them. So we're called advocates. Charles Hamilton Houston famously said that a lawyer is either a social engineer or he's a parasite on society. And I say that quote a lot to people we work with. And, I think about what a lawyer can do, because at the end of the day, if we're not changing things through laws or through the courts or through some kind of administrative or executive action taken by the state or by the federal government, then what we have is just words on a paper. And so lawyers are trained, and lawyers like to get a bad rap, and a lot of people, like to criticize us. But at the end of the day, what we're trained to do is to change the way society is structured. And if you think about what we're doing in our department, it's about keeping people safe, making sure the laws that we have are enforced, rethinking those laws when we need to, putting new regulations in place, going to court, which, by the way, our attorneys do all the time. So if that's what you want to do, Precious, come work with us. We'll set up an internship right away.
Remember that in about 10 years, let's say 10.
I think you're moving quicker than that, but we'd love to have
maybe even 5.
Yeah.
Actually, give me one more. I'm about to graduate.
Call us when you want that internship. I think the best use of illegal training is making sure that we're putting laws in place and enforcing them in ways that keep us safe, that protect our residents. And that means all 9 million people that live in this state, not just some of them. And that the law is supposed to be the great equalizer. It's never been fully realized, I promise, but I think we all try to get up every day and push that ball forward and make the state a little bit more just. And that's what I rely on my training to do. My wife does think I'm allergic to private practice because I've had two terms. But look, I learned a lot there. I also did a lot of pro bono work when I was in private practice. I represented people going through immigration proceedings, including an American citizen who they were trying to deport, which is something, unfortunately, the incoming president is talking about now. But, I had a great experience, did a lot of good work, but I love being in public service. I love every day in public service.
So let me ask this question, because you kind of touched on it a little bit about what the law is. It's words on the paper, and right, you're there as a person to enforce those laws, to go after people who are breaking those laws. Oftentimes we see in the media, a case comes up, we see something happen and people go, oh, they're going to get off, or the law doesn't apply to them. And then we see the result and it's not what people think should happen. How do we reconcile what's written in the law and how people use the law to kind of get themselves out of trouble when maybe they shouldn't be?
Yeah.
Right? The ethics and morality question. How do you wrestle with that in your work?
I think it's the core problem we're facing as a country right now. I think when you look at your generation, I see in you a real optimism and a sense and a belief in what we're doing, but your generation has less faith in government than any generation in modern history. And that's true for every generation now, that the levels of support and trust in government are at all-time lows. And that's a real problem. And I can't say I blame folks for feeling that way, because too often they see that there are multiple sets of rules. That you got one side, people who don't have connections and aren't powerful, and they're not big businesses, or they're not politically important, or whatever it may be, and they play by one set of rules. And then they see other folks in positions of power getting treated differently, and using the power that they have to help themselves and not look out for the people that, whether they're politicians or big businesses. And so for me, I've been very clear, this is probably not made everybody happy. But
I don't imagine so.
But my job is to enforce the laws, and the only way people will feel like government is working for them is if they see government working for them.
Right.
If they see, yes, accountability in some respects when people break the law, regardless of who they are, whether you're driving violence or you're politically corrupt or you're a big business that's defrauding people. There's all harms that associate with that. And I don't think we should be making moral judgments about which harms are worse.
Yeah.
When I enforce the law, it's got to be impartial, and we can't be cutting corners because somebody is more powerful or more influential.
Right.
And too often that happens.
Yeah.
So I understand the cynicism. It's something that I myself have seen and been frustrated by. But it's also something that I think we can change if people see what government can do, how we can help. I mean, yesterday we announced that we brought back last year $600 million through lawsuits that we filed to the state of New Jersey just over the course of this year.
It's distributed to nonprofit organizations doing great work in the community immediately.
Well,
that'll solve a lot of our problems.
It's money being paid by a lot of businesses that have hurt our residents. It's money going back into our residents' pockets. It's lowering their costs. It's attacking things like the opioid epidemic, and it has affected every community in this state and every community in this country. And so, I hope when people see things like that, they realize, oh, wow, there are people out there trying to fight the fight for them. And that's why I love this job, because I am the people's lawyer. I do get to stand up on your behalf, even if you have no idea who I am. And most don't. In fact, I was at a play date for my son last week, and we were talking for a while, and with one of the dads there, and he had invited me over. He was like, wait a second, what do you do for a living? And I told him. He was like, I'm the attorney general in my house. And I was like, right now I'm just Robert's dad. So, but the point is, I get to do that with or without any fanfare, and it's a huge privilege. And I hope that the more we do that type of work, people see that government can help them. We need people to believe in government. We need people to believe that it can serve them. Otherwise, the democracy that this nation is built upon will not survive.
So I got to follow up, and then I'll hand it over to you. But because obviously, going after a gun manufacturer, these are billions of dollars flowing in and out of the country to this country, whatever. And then one of your major cases were going after a power broker in Southern Jersey, right? And so you talked about the rule of law and that you're the top law enforcement person. Where does that desire to go after those who might have the resources, the connections, the power to kind of get themselves out of those jams, and how have you avoided not getting wrapped into some of the politics of playing the game for your own benefit, right? Because to do those things doesn't necessarily make you a popular person in public office sometimes, I would imagine.
No, and I'm not going to speak about any particular case, but when I was 23, I was working in Washington. And one of my best friends from Stanford, met the first day of school, told me he was thinking of running for city council in San Antonio. I said, great, I'll run your campaign. I'd never been to San Antonio. I never run a campaign. That was very cheap. So I moved into his friend's mom's house. The price was right for him, and I ran his campaign. And during the course of that campaign, I saw this was a low-income community, overwhelmingly first-generation Mexican-American community, large military presence there, so interesting mix of population, and a lot of undocumented folks, and folks who needed government to help them. And 3 of the 4 council members that in the district that I was working in, size of a congressional district, had been indicted for bribery. I was approached by multiple people to pay them for their endorsement. We saw a government official was just paying car payments and mortgage payments out of their account, and actually, quite amazingly, was publishing the reimbursements on their forms. So it was just out in the open.
Wow.
Nobody would write about it. Nobody would talk about it. And meanwhile, this was a part of town that wasn't getting investment, that government wasn't working for them. And I understood why people were frustrated. And I saw that, and I said, I'm going to go to law school, and I wanted to be a corruption prosecutor. Because I felt like it was so core that people saw that the same people that are prosecuting all these other crimes we're holding powerful people to account when they broke our trust and violated our laws. And because these were not victimless. And so now, fast forward years, I spent years in the governor's office. I worked on state budgets. When you take money out of the state budget, it's not like there's an unlimited pot.
Right.
It means organizations like yours aren't getting funded. It means schools like yours aren't getting funded. It means healthcare organizations aren't getting funded. It means we're not doing work that we should be doing on behalf of the people. And so it's not a victimless crime. And I feel very strongly about that. And, I joke with my wife, like when I started, I didn't have any friends in politics when I started a decade ago in the state. So if I leave this job with no friends in government or politics, then I'll have the same number that I started with.
Right back to where you are.
But, it's easy for me to do it because I've always tried to remember what this work is about. I always try to remember who we're fighting for and not get caught up in the political games. Once you start sort of making decisions about cases or things because of politics is when you should probably find a different line of work if you're in my job. And I'll tell you one free piece of advice that was given to me when I was in law school by somebody who's still a mentor of mine. She said to me, courage is a muscle. And all the work all the legal training you're going to get, all the work you're going to do, that's important. But strengthening that muscle is the most important thing. And, you'll have times in your life, I know I feel this way, I'm sure you feel this way in your work, and that you have to do things that are hard. And it upsets sometimes people that you might like and trust. But if it's the right thing to do when you look yourself in the mirror, and I sleep very well at night knowing that I've tried to make decisions based on what I thought was the right thing to do. And hopefully, people understand that. And if they don't, then they probably weren't my friend in the first place.
That's awesome. I love that. I mean, I think that's right, to do it for that pure thought, feeling of serving the community. I wish all of our political leaders thought that way, because that's really what the concept is built on, that you're serving to the people and for the people. And so I want to turn it over to Precious.
The only thing I would just say about that is when the relative few abuse that trust, they do a disservice to everybody else who's doing good work. There are so many good public officials in this city and across the state who are doing that. And everyone gets branded the same way.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate
thing. And
bit.
it is. And it breeds a cynicism, and it makes everybody's job harder to do the good work that they're trying to do. That's why, when I feel like I'm standing up and we're doing this work, it's not just on behalf of me, but it's on behalf of all of the people of the state and all the people who are trying to serve the state.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I just personally love it. And I think, again, that concept of, on the other side of that, it's not everybody, right? And even, we talked about my sister being a law enforcement, right? So the majority of cops are great cops. And, we have to support cops because they support us and they keep us safe. And I think we just have to understand that there are bad people in places and they're going to do things, and we have to fight against that. And so
we have 40,000 cops in the state of New Jersey, including folks like your sister who are doing great work. And just in any profession, you got bad lawyers, you got people who make mistakes, you got people who embarrass the profession, and it hurts all of us. And so, when we talk about accountability or reform, it's not, I have tremendous respect. We have the best trained law enforcement in the country. We should be proud of that. Like I said, we've never been safer. It doesn't mean we can't get better.
Right.
It doesn't mean that if somebody does something wrong, there shouldn't be some accountability, because that shows everybody that the 40,000 others that are doing the right thing every day, that they're held to a high standard.
Yeah.
And that you should trust them, because when something goes wrong, they're held to that high standard. Absolutely. And I think the vast majority of law enforcement appreciates that and respects that.
Okay, so on the topic of holding people accountable, no matter their position, no matter their rank, just taking it from my perspective, and I don't know if I could necessarily go this route. If I can't, we'll take it out.
Yeah, we'll see. You know how you like to get controversial.
Yeah. Speaking about our incoming president and everything that our generation has seen, if I'm being honest, it's a lot of hope lost, especially if you see someone in such a high ranking with so much power and you see all the things they've done. And it's not like it's an immediate thing. Like, it's proven that there's been cases held against him, and there's so many things that people have said about him, so many things that he's done with no type of remorse. It's like seeing that type of person still become president it's kind of, like I said, hope lost. It's kind of discouraging because now it's like, okay, we're in a place where it's like, okay, we're kind of seeing that something is changing in law enforcement. We're kind of trusting these people. And now we see this and we see all of his policies and we see all of the things that our people who are associated with him say. So my question is, what do you think is going to bridge that gap between us and then those who we see so high in power that at this point it kind of feels like there's nothing we can do?
Yeah. I've said this many times since November 5th. We had a free and fair election in this country, and what sets us apart from every other system of government is that we respect that. And, President Trump is the president-elect, and January 20th, he'll be the president. And you're never going to hear out of my mouth any words that question that. And he's entitled to do, to put in place a policy agenda that he sees fit. What he's not entitled to do is break the law. When people have rights, and those rights didn't change. Your rights didn't change. My rights didn't change. Your rights didn't change from November 5th to November the 6th. And so one thing that we've said very clearly is if the law is broken, if those rights are violated, if people in my state are hurt, my job is to stand up for them and protect them in the same way I do against big businesses or gun violence or whatever it may be. But the broader point you make is one that gets to me, and I've heard it a lot. Because, I think back to, I talked about, how I got engaged, going door to door in high school about the Sullivan's band. But, when I was your age, I was watching Barack Obama speak about, I did, the Democratic National Convention about One America, about uniting this country, and starting a message of hope that then carried for the next 12 years. And, your generation is growing up, put aside what side of the aisle you're on, in a very different political time. Now, it wasn't all great. I mean, we had the Iraq War, Afghanistan war in Afghanistan. There was, post 9/11, a real fear of others that was starting to become prevalent even in New Jersey. But it was a different political time, and there was hope, and there was a belief that government could do things. And that's why, when I graduated from college, I moved to DC with no job. My mom really loved that. I took the savings I had from, a summer teaching gig to rent an apartment to try to work in government. And I worry that, your generation, if you look at whether it's the polling or just the conversations I have with folks your age, like, they're not feeling that way. And I don't blame them, because what they see is a lot of negativity, a lot of ugliness, and a lot of divisiveness. And now we're going to see some things that, if the president follows through on what he said he would do, that are could be potentially really harmful to a lot of people. And so, my message to you would be is, like, look, we got to think about this long term. We've had a lot of moments in this country's history where it's been dark. We went through a civil war. We went through Jim Crow. We went through the civil rights period. We went through Vietnam. And each time, I think if you were probably living through that moment, you'd question, could things get better? And then they did, in some way, shape, or form. Because people stood up and fought and advocated and made their voices heard. And were brave and courageous, as I talked about. And, so not to put it all on your shoulders, but, like, I'm looking at you, and I'm like, you could be that hope. I mean, the way you're viewing the world, you're way wiser than your years. I mean, I talk to, like, a lot of elected and appointed officials across this country who don't have the wisdom that you've put out in the last 20 minutes or so. And so, just the biggest thing I could say, and it may sound easy coming from me, and you got to believe this yourself, and your friends got to believe this, like, don't give up. Though if you disagree with something, whatever side of the aisle you're on, if you disagree, the surest way to lose is if you give up. So make your voice heard. You're making your voice heard. You actually have a microphone, literally and figuratively. But the more you do it, the better at it you'll get. And people do listen. We talk about gun violence. It's your generation that changed the conversation nationally about gun violence. 2 years ago, Congress passed the first, talking about advocacy I did, we failed in 2004. Congress passed the first law to combat gun violence in your generation. And in my opinion, what did it is because the younger generation stood up and said they were sick of it. I grew up in the Columbine generation. I thought we would have solved this problem by now. But the fact is, your generation has grown up in a country where the single biggest cause of death for kids is a gun. And you're sick of it. And so the more you make your voice heard, whether it's on that issue or any other issue, you can have an impact. And just trust that if you do that, and if more of you do it, things can get better. And that's sort of the guiding belief that's kept me motivated through my career. Because otherwise, the alternative is other folks are going to set the agenda. It may not be what you agree with.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Precious, for coming on to my
job.
show.
I get interviewed not a decent amount. This was the best interview. I'm not kidding. Most thoughtful. You got a future, whether it's in government or maybe you hosting the Today Show, if that even is around someday. Or podcast.
Yeah, or podcast.
Yeah.
Stamped.
Yeah.
So
subscribe,
like.
turn
Thank you to the Attorney General for coming out. Precious is actually the host of Stamped. I forgot to say that at the top, but you'll see more of her next year. And we're going to rock and roll. We're getting out of here. We're going to enjoy the rest of our day. Hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.